Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So this is a video on my poetry channel. Hopefully I'll remember to put it on the correct channel. Anyhow, I'm going to read a piece by Wordsworth, who's one of the Romantic poets. Perhaps I'll tell you more about him afterwards. But this poem exemplifies his attitude of deriving gratification from the simplest thing. And this poem was requested by one of my viewers. So request them and I'll post. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth that show had brought to me. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with those daffodils. So I think you'll agree that's a highly delightful poem. It's one of his best known. It's brief, it's unadorned, it's unpretentious, and that's a typical Wordsworth. All right, the prelude is quite lengthy, but that's his autobiography in verse. He didn't write any prose at all. If you ever watched For Weddings and Funeral, there's one character supposed to be a boorish, crashing snob and an ignoramus, and this chap says, I didn't go to university, I didn't see what the novels of Wordsworth had to do with earning a living. Because, of course, Wordsworth didn't write any novels. It took me a few viewings of the film to click. This meant to tell us something about the character. Anyhow, so it obviously takes the title from its opening line. So clouds, I like that. Are they lonely? Sometimes they're in a mass, as they were today here, when it was exceedingly overcast. So the daffodils, and they spring at this time. You see them particularly in late March into early April. So they're fluttering and dancing. He's personifying them. He's attributing human characteristics, saying that their movement is terpsichorean, and it's as though they have agencies. So comparing them to other fascinating things in nature, such as stars. So they're beside a bay. Is that the sea, or is it one of those meres in the Lake District, like Lake Windermere? Because he was from there, Cockermouth, one of the rudest toponyms in the British Isles. A solicitor's son from that area. He was at school with Fletcher Christian, who was the leader of the mutiny on the Bounty. And when it mentions gay, this doesn't mean he's a homosexual. It means joyful, jocund company. Jocund, a word I've got to work into conversation rather more. I make it my one-man mission to revive these archaic words. I gazed and gazed. So a little bit of repetition is welcome in poesy. Just like in the Ballad of Reading Gaol, when Oscar Wilde says, that tent of blue that prisoners call the sky, and that becomes a leitmotif of this poem. Because is it just out there had a little small window he was peeping through? Is that it? This tent of grey, as it would be in the British Isles much of the time. For oft meaning often, he writes that. He says couch, not sofa. Did they not say couch back then? Maybe we're more French then, as in se coucher on the chaise longue. In vacant or in pensive mood, well, sometimes your mind seems empty. That's when you're vacant. Pensive, thoughtful. Are these opposites? Anyway, flash upon that inward eye. And I wonder that's where images appear in your mind. We sometimes mistake this for the ophthalmological sense. And I've made this mistake once, seen something that wasn't there because I was remembering something which had been in that location the day before. Or when Skype starts going, the lights flashing, I for an instant saw that as traffic lights, because there's the green and the red. I don't know, is that orange? Probably not. But I've got to try and make sense of that in a split second, and my mind links that to traffic lights. But obviously, in a fraction of a second, I see it as it really is. So one can confuse memory with the ocular sensation, which I suppose is why people see phantoms sometimes, because they're remembering images of them or people who've died or whatever, and desperately wanting to see their dead loved one. My heart with pleasure fills and dances with those daffodils. So as though his heart could dance, and how he's delighted. So you can find satisfaction in the ordinary things which are so mundane, which we pass by so much and don't give a single thought to. I've done this, just smelling things, smelling flowers, or seeing a rubber hammer bizarrely, and actually when I was 18, taking time to touch it. I'll never forget that day. Well, remarkable day for reasons I shan't go into. February 1998, going down to the University of Southampton, as I crossed over that bridge and just determined to find happiness in these unremarkable things. Anyway, that's my penny's worth about Wordsworth, one of those prophets of the Romantic movement, someone who took the keenest pleasure in nature and detested the transport revolution, the industrial revolution, which he thought was about factories belching smoke and pollution, ghastly noise. He felt that the whole thing was really perfectly horrid, and abominated trains, for instance. Remember, he was 55 when the train was invented, and that was considered old, not middle-aged in his time, because he was born in 1770. Had been radical in artistic terms, attracted to the French Revolution, but had a cultural retreat and became a Tory, became a staunch Anglican, and all the rest of it, and was reactionary against technology as well. I'm not sure if he ever went on a train. That's enough from me. Toodaloo.